So, good evening and welcome to this session of Meet the Academics at the Institute of Continuing Education as part of our Science and Medicine Open Week. Just to note that this session is being recorded this evening. So, what we're going to do this evening is we'd like to answer any questions that prospective students might have about our courses, and we have a panel of academics from the Institute here to answer questions and talk to you generally about the courses. So we have panelists from both our postgraduate and our undergraduate provision. And I'd like to introduce those to you. So if we start with Jeremy.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Webb. I'm a medic. I've been running the postgraduate certificate in medical education for about the last 12 years. We're going to be running the same program again in the year to come. My background is general practice, but I was a GP trainer and I've been a graduate course tutor for the last 25 years. So I teach medical undergraduates and postgraduates.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Kenny.
Thanks, Emma. I'm Kenny Langlands. I'm a scientist by training. My background is in cancer biology and informatics. The last few years I've been more involved in medical education. My remit is the MST in genomic medicine. And again, I'm happy to take any questions as they come up.
Thanks, Kenny. Sarah.
Hi, I'm a researcher working in the field of viral immunology, and I have contributed to help developing the original syllabus with Tom Money for the Certificate of Immunology, and I've been teaching on the Certificate of Immunology since it was introduced in 2020.
Thank you. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Emma English. I'm an Associate Professor in Medicine and Health at the Institute of Continuing Education. My background is that I started out as a scientist in microbiology, protein biochemistry, and then moved across into NHS with my training as a clinical biochemist. So I'm a registered clinical biochemist, and I work with large organisations and NGOs around the world on improving access to diagnostic testing in low resource settings. And at ICE, my main role is that I have oversight of all of the programmes within the medicine and health and biological sciences, life sciences portfolio. So please do put any questions that you might have in the Q&A box, and I'll keep an eye on it and we'll draw those up for you and pose those to our panelists as and when we post them. But I would like to start off by asking a couple of questions directly of our panelists. And I'll start with Jeremy and ask, what kind of students do you have studying in your course?
So the course we run is open to anybody who's working in healthcare and healthcare education. If I'm honest, it has traditionally been mainly doctors, so people who've done medicine, but we've had a good selection of dentists who've joined us in the last 4 or 5 years. We've got some veterinary practitioners at the moment, and we've had some vets in the past couple of years. We've had people who public health physicians who have got there without going through a medical degree. We've had nurses, and we've had physicians associates in the last couple of years as well.
So a really diverse range of people from different healthcare backgrounds. Fantastic. Kenny, same question for you.
Again, we want to encourage that breadth of people from the whole raft of different backgrounds, whether from a scientific or a healthcare background. I mean, the programme was launched 2015 in response to a tender from Health Education England, as they were then, who recognised there was a need to upskill the workforce. So the expertise and leadership was there to allow the deployment of genomic medicine more effectively, following on from the 100,000 Genomes Project, when it was recognised you could do that high throughput analysis at scale. It was how could you apply that the these very complex tests and interpret them and use them to inform diagnosis and management. So the majority of the students who apply to us, so for the MST, come from a healthcare background, whether they're doctors, biomedical scientists, genetic counselors, midwives, and nurses. But one thing we've recognized is that there are barriers to entry to the course. And we also have a modular approach. So if we have a midwife, for example, who's involved in counselling, working with families who have children with a genetic disease, if they want to develop their understanding and be able to communicate effectively, we have a modular option so they can sort of test the water and then build a master's program from there. So it's multidisciplinary. I think one of the strengths of the course is we have individuals in a room with a range of backgrounds that can share their experience. And we've been very successful in upskilling the workforce, but also in training the next generation of leaders who are going to innovate in the configuration and delivery of genomic medicine services.
Thanks, Kenny. And Sarah?
So the nice thing about the undergraduate certificate in immunology is aimed at level 4, so it's the equivalent to first year undergraduate. So there really isn't any barriers to being able to study on it. I mean, there will be benefits if the prospective student has at least got to the point of having done GCSE biology, A-level biology, just to be able to understand some of the broader concepts of molecular and cellular biology that underpin immunology. But generally, there isn't, apart from an English language requirement, anyone can sign on because it is, as I said, first year undergraduate.
And if say I wanted to do the immunology course and I didn't have my science background, or it's been a very long time since I did my GCSEs, is there anything you might recommend to people before they start the course?
There's probably, I was going to say, showing an interest. So reading some general science, immunology, popular science immunology books. There's some quite good authors out there that are working in the field of immunology have written those popular science books, like Dan Davis has done a few different books. And he's like professor of immunology at Imperial College, but it's sort of it's sort of showing being interested to learn more. So we've had people on the course previously who, surprisingly post-pandemic, wanted to understand more about how vaccines work, how so they could be more informed themselves about the sort of current what's going on around them, and sort of wanting to understand immunology more. But they were coming very much from a non-sciencey background, so that, and they have managed, we sort of ease people in, so you don't have to come in fully working and understanding at the start.
Thanks. And I suppose if you've got people coming in with different perspectives on these things as well, so different to people who may have taken a scientific approach to their learning before, and do you have opportunities for your students to share those different perspectives and experience in discussion groups?
Yes, I think we sort of do. Very much the sort of students that come in with a particular, I'll not say agenda, but a strong interest. So the certificate in immunology, for instance, we do a sort of basic unit that introduces the sort of concepts of immunology, and then there's a unit looking at its sort of health and disease, which covers more things like allergy, chronic inflammation and vaccination, and then the final unit's on cancer immunology. So often that's driven, I think the cancer immunology unit in particular often recruits some of the students because they're interested in understanding more about that. So they might focus very much on that sort of area, and not to the detriment of everything else, but you sort of need the building blocks beforehand to be able to sort of understand those. So there are the groups, and I was going to say the virtual learning environment is very important because ours is a purely online course, synchronous course. So, and I understand the students do sort of socialise and discuss and talk amongst themselves, and the tutors are definitely available to answer questions as well. So that helps in the support.
And I think also the course is available as a partner to the infectious disease course, isn't it? So you can take the two together to get 120 credits at level 4 and a certificate in higher education. How how does it feed into other courses? Because we have undergraduate courses in genetics as well.
Yeah, so I understand from Tom Money, who's the course convener for immunology and also does run the genetics certificate as well. He said that because the cancer immunology is some of that is underpinned by genetic differences, and actually quite a lot of immunological diseases come down to genetics. So quite a few students have either gone on to either the infectious diseases or the genetics course. And also ICE does offer further sort of advanced diplomas, sort of level 5 and level 6 courses as well. So that might be a stepping stone onto some of those as well.
Yeah, it's true. I've certainly got a student at the moment who's on the advanced diploma course who's doing the immunology of the infectious disease actually at the moment, but also pairing it with the advanced diploma. And they're looking at COVID variations and variants and tracking COVID variants. So you can use the knowledge from one course and build on it and introduce it into further courses. Thank you. So thinking about the postgraduate courses, because of course nearly all of our undergraduate courses are entirely online, apart from the undergraduate certificate and pre-medical studies, which we can talk about a little bit later. But thinking about our postgraduate provision, our postgraduate courses do have residential elements to it. So Jeremy, would you like to tell us a bit more about what happens on a residential for medical education?
Well, in fact, we're moving. During the pandemic, we moved completely online. For the last couple of years, we've run majority of the sessions face to face, but with some online. Next year, our plan is to run most of them face to face, and that is at the request of students and getting student feedback on the courses we've been running. So they're not actually residential usually, because we only do one. We start off with a 2-day meeting, so there are places to stay at Madingley if you're coming from a long way away. So the first weekend is to try and get people to start thinking about medical education, but also try and get them to start working together as a cohort. And we deliberately run all of our sessions as interactive workshops. So we will introduce a concept. We will often illustrate some teaching point that we're trying to make by actually doing it, and then get people to discuss it and how it has affected them as a learner, and also to get them to think about how they might use that themselves as a teacher as we move forward.
Thanks, Jeremy. And one of our other courses we have, which is clinical research, education and leadership, also has residential sessions or taught sessions at Madingley Hall as well. But genomic medicine is a little bit different, Kenny. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, it has a very strong face-to-face peer learning ethos. The teaching is configured in such a way so it is delivered in intensive 1-week face-to-face blocks. So, for example, the stratified medicine course is running this week. There are 6 sessions a day run over 5 days. It is very intensive, but there are a range of opportunities for learners to construct their understanding through traditional lectures, through debates, through practical classes. But again, it's that very much about that construction of learning in the room. And again, the model is very intensive, but that also allows busy professionals to identify whether it's time for study leave or using their annual leave to facilitate that. Again, we have pretty much stuck to the line that it's a face-to-face learning experience.
And the type of places you actually undertake the teaching.
So, I mean, most of the teaching takes place in the clinical school. So we are we're in seminar rooms, breakout rooms, computer labs, because a number, but the key thing about the genomic medicine course, it is absolutely practitioner-led. We do have people from scientific backgrounds who may want to go on to study medicine or become biomedical scientists or whatever. But the initial design was to make sure that health professionals had the skills to understand and deploy best practice in genomic medicine. So we do have a collaboration with the European Bioinformatics Institute, for example. Students used to go down to the the Genome campus, but in the future that's probably going to return back to Cambridge again. I think the students prefer being in Cambridge, but again we try and accommodate as far as possible. We do use some of the computer labs in some of the city centre sites. Some teaching takes place in Madingley Hall. I think it's nice for students to come and get the experience of this place. So we have counselling, for example. This is a great environment for that that kind of rapport building. So again, it's all about varying the stimulus, giving the students a rich experience, giving them an experience of being in Cambridge as well, of course. But it's just those opportunities. It's those incidental conversations. It's the chats over coffee. It's those links. They're probably as rich and as important as anything else.
Thank you. So what do you do outside of that face-to-face teaching to support students in their learning? So what kind of opportunities are there for student support and peer support within the courses? Jeremy, if I can come back to you, what kind of things do you do to support the learning community?
So we have, whilst we didn't go back to all face-to-face, there's quite a good improved online presence. So we use a flipped classroom approach for a lot of our teaching. So we will tell the students at least 2 weeks in advance what we're going to be covering and give them something to whet their appetite to start thinking about the topics that we're going to be dealing with in advance. So we will upload papers or use video clips that might be relevant to them about teaching. We then have an extensive reading list that people can look up things after a session. We also, every student on the course has a small group tutor, and all of the small group tutors are people who have done the course themselves. So for the postgraduate certificate, all the people who are tutors have gone on to do the master's programme that we run. And so the postgraduate certificate goes on to a diploma and then a master's, a year at each, part-time. So they have links with their small group tutors. We also encourage them to keep an online portfolio of their learning experiences and share those with other members of the group. And I have to say that some people find that very useful, some people don't engage with that, but it's up to them as to what they want to do.
Thank you. And Sarah, because your courses obviously are 100% online.
Yes, so as I said, the VLE is probably the most important interaction tool we have outside of the synchronous sessions, which are done over Zoom. And it's interesting to see some students very much engage in the VLE and use it a lot and will ask questions and interact. And as tutors, we also try to provide material there. So for the synchronous sessions, which are totally online, we provide the sort of agenda, what we're going to cover, sort of some pre-material, so that the students aren't coming in cold and get an idea of what they're actually going to be covering. We sort of vary the length of them as well, because that helps on the engagement. So the first term, the first unit, we do sort of 4 3-hour sessions on separate weekends, which has worked a lot better for sort of getting across the fundamental concepts of all of innate and adaptive immunity to students. And then it's sort of a bit of a mixture, sort of longer, more intense for the sort of subsequent units. And it's just to do with the way the material's delivered and the preference of the tutors as well. But it's sort of like when you're introducing such a vast topic, particularly to people that might not have any background in the area at all, I think, yeah, that sort of bite size and lots of extra support and the ability for them to ask questions and approach the tutors is essential for them to be able to sort of ask the stupid questions, which there are a lot of in immunology at times, when you sort of get very confused about what is this? I don't understand.
Thank you. And I think for anyone who's joining who was interested in the certificate in pre-medical studies, unfortunately our course director couldn't join us this evening because they're unwell, but I know that there were some people who were interested in hearing a bit more about that. And that's our slightly unusual in the sense that it's one of our undergraduate courses, but it's online and it's blended learning. So we have face-to-face sessions as well. And it's also a full-time course. So this course, we have quite a lot of material on our virtual learning environment. So we have short videos, we have quizzes, we have worksheets. We have a lot of material that we put up for students to work through. We do case studies. So today, my students, we're working together and we were working through a case study in clinical biochemistry. So we're looking at diabetes and how we diagnose diabetes. So we really try and use material that bridges that science and clinical gap for that course. But that is a full-time course. We have live online sessions for 3 sessions per week, and then every month students come up to Cambridge, and at the moment we're being hosted by the Faculty of Education. So we use facilities in the Faculty of Education and undertake laboratory practicals in person, and also have workshops and talk sessions in person as well. So that's the one course that's a little bit different from our normal undergraduate provision. So just thinking a bit more around classes and class sizes, what do you think you would say is your average class size? Because the question we get asked quite often. So Kenny, how many people do you often see in the modules on genomic medicine?
I mean, I think we've tried to, you can get sort of caught up in class sizes. You can have a very rich, engaging experience with 150 people in a room if you configure your teaching in such a way that provides us opportunities for interactivity, for breakouts in small groups. I mean, you can argue it both ways. You do run some very small groups. You may have half a dozen students in a room, and they will get a fantastic experience. You will have the session leaders undivided attention. I think the session today, I think there were 40 students in the stratified medicine room, but again, the students recognize the quality of the teaching, the opportunities for that exchange of ideas. You've got the breakout afterwards. They're coming back to those rich conversations, those peer networks. So I think irrespective of the class size, you can still have a very learner-focused experience, and no one gets lost in the system. If you're talking about support earlier on, there's always a temptation to think that medics or health professionals are organized self-starters. Actually, they have the same anxieties and support needs as an undergraduate medic might. So I think knowing that the staff are accessible and to help them navigate, we have a lot of online resources. Some ways, of course, it's quite traditional, lots of pre-reading, lots of support materials. But we do want to encourage that intellectual curiosity, the development of adult learners. So there's a variety from module to module. Because we have individuals who are doing the MST all the way through, we want to encourage, say, nurses, midwives, for example, to take 1 or 2 modules as a taster. So every module has a different flavor. And having come from a medical school where we're teaching after a while can fall into a pattern, there is real diversity here, which is a real strength of the course. Every module has a different feeling, it's got a different leadership, different teaching team. And I think that really helps to engage, enthuse, and motivate the teaching team as well as the students.
Thanks, Kenny. I'll come back to Sarah for next class, because obviously you're online, so you have the capacity to host as many students as you like. But on average, how many students do you think join each year?
So I'm thinking we're sort of certificate. I think the most we've had is 30 actually students participating, and of those that actually come to the live synchronous sessions, I'd say it's only about a 50% attendance. So it can be, I think because it's online, some people just very much dip in, and it suits people that aren't necessarily so outgoing and don't want to do the piece, because as everything's recorded, you can sort of dip in and do everything yourself in your own time and your own speed. But yeah, students, I think when we actually are doing the synchronous sessions, it's been about sort of 10, 15. I think we might have got up to 18, 20 in a session. And actually, because Zoom does allow you to have quite a number of people participating, you've got the ability to go into breakout rooms. It is quite manageable to sort of be able to get students to work together in groups and do other things together. But yes, it's not been a massive, it's not like a undergraduate university full-time course in that sense.
Thank you. And Jeremy?
So we now limit the numbers to about 50 in a year, but we deliberately split the groups into 2 cohorts. So we never try and teach more than 25 at a time. And that's partly because of limitation of room space. Because we run workshops, we use what's known in the trade as bistro style learning, where people sit around tables and work in smaller groups. And if you have more than that in a room, then literally people can't move. We, on the whole, we tend to run cohorts of 25, and we run them consecutively on the same day. And we try, you talked a bit about support earlier, we try and keep the same lead facilitator with one group throughout the year, so they get to know the group fairly well. So when we first ran this course, we ran it with 20 to 25, and I knew everybody on the course. It's more difficult when there are 50 at a time. We do have a couple of what we call guest spots, where we have specialist people coming in to talk, delivering sessions, and we then run those in what's known as the salon in Madingley, which is this very grand, rather beautiful room where you can get 50 people in the room. But again, we run that in small groups with breakout rooms, and it's never run in a lecture style.
Thank you. I must admit, when I first heard Madingley, when I first joined the University of Cambridge, I can remember thinking, how do you teach in this place? Because the views out of the windows are so fantastic, and the gardens are amazing. They're just such a big distraction as well. But people do sit and knuckle down and focus, I think possibly because the environment is beautiful. So for those postgraduate courses that do have elements up at Madingley Hall, it is a really lovely experience to come and see. So I'd like to switch tack a little bit and talk about assessments, because a lot of people worry about, I'm going to be assessed, how am I going to be assessed? I haven't written anything for a very long time. Will I be able to do this? So starting with Kenny, what kind of assessments are set in genomic medicine?
I mean, Cambridge in some ways is very traditional. I think we need to, there's a balance between contemporary educational practice and modern thinking, and then recognizing that at Cambridge, you've got a cadre, a cohort of educators who are absolutely experts in the field. And Cambridge has quite a traditional approach to assessment. It's quite essay-based. So there's one assessment per module, and it may be a piece of critiquing a particular technique, for example. But there will be, for example, in the introductory module, there could be a family history. Students have to create a pedigree, then go through a series of variants, looking at levels of evidence for pathogenicity. So, I mean, an ideal assessment is preparing students for how they're going to use that learning in the workplace. But there is quite a traditional approach to assessments. You're looking at something like a report or an essay of something like 3,000 words, and that is quite consistent. But we are striving towards diversifying the assessment. We are doing our best to assess learning effectively, and again, just situated towards how the learning will be used. Again, it is quite traditional in that respect.
Thanks. So if I think about the pre-medical course, that's a course that's actually, the purpose of the course is to support people to get the underpinning science knowledge, predominantly chemistry and biology, and also understand some of the more biopsychosocial elements of preparing to study medicine. So that course is mirrored on what you might expect during the first year of medical school, bearing in mind, obviously, not all medical schools are the same and have different approaches to learning and different structures to learning. But it is, again, unusual for ICE because we actually have sit-down assessments. We have examinations in that course. So we have single best answer, multi-choice questions. We have short answer questions. And we also, and they're timed exams under exam conditions. So that is to mirror the kind of experience that students may experience in different medical schools. But we do also have a coursework element as well. And for that coursework, we tailor it towards supporting students to prepare for interview, for example, at medical school, but also to understand the ethos of the NHS and structure and workings of the NHS and patient perspectives as well. So we have a mix of coursework and examination, but it's quite different from other courses in that we do actually have written examinations for that course. Jeremy, how does it work in medical education?
I think people will be pleased to know we don't have written examinations. We have the postgraduate certificate, which is what I lead, is run in 3 modules, and for the first module and the last module, there is a summative assessment, which is a written essay of about 4,500 words, and it will ask them to look at 3 of the educational models that we might have discussed during the term, and then we've usually discussed about 15 of them. But we just get them to pick 3 that float their boat, that particularly they feel is relevant to their situation. And half of that is to discuss and critique those models. And then we ask them to think about how that applies to them as a learner and how it will apply to them as a teacher. So that's the first one. In the second module, we don't have a summative assignment. We have a formative assignment, which is compulsory, which is where the students are asked to produce a lesson plan for a session they're going to deliver, and they deliver that within their tutor groups to their peers, and they get peer reviewed on it. So we start talking about the value of peer review and working with your colleagues and getting regular feedback. And it's also a matter of practicing with giving and receiving feedback. And then finally, we ask them to describe their educational journey and think about how they've developed during the year of postgraduate certificate in medical education. The diploma goes on to do is a similar part where there's a formative and a summative assessment, and the masters there's a project write-up at the end, which is the formal assessment.
Thank you. And Sarah, how does assessment work with the online undergraduate courses?
So we do have proper sort of formative assessment, and it's split into 2 halves. So we have a sort of 50% mark comes from individual unit short answer and structured answer questions, which have to be submitted at the sort of the beginning of the next term by a certain deadline, using the sort of Turnitin, which is actually the sort of common practice most universities are now using for getting people to do assessments. There's no more putting your handwritten essay into a pigeonhole to hand in on time. So we do that, and sort of the structured answer questions reflect each of the individual units. And the short answer questions, and sort of just help to reinforce the learning that the students have done, and they get feedback and obviously a mark from that. The other half is we sort of call portfolios, and there's portfolio topics which are a bit more broader in term and can be very traditional, could be an essay, but we also allows the students to develop into things on particular topics, just delve that bit deeper on something they're really interested in. So there's topics from each unit, or there's also topics that encompass the whole of the course. So you could do something that overarches multiple units, and they can do a poster or a presentation, a podcast. There's different ways of doing it. So if they're a slightly more visual learner, you know, it allows the students at that point to actually play to their strengths. So if they're not great at writing an essay, then they don't have to. There's other ways of presenting the topics, but it still needs that same sort of research and background. You know, I know from in my professional job, you know, doing posters for materials, what goes into a poster and what goes into a scientific paper, it's very similar background thinking. It's just the way you present it and the amount of words you use that is very much different. So it's actually quite a useful tool to be able to give them that option.
Thank you. So one of the things that also happens for pre-med is we provide obviously information about the assessment and what we expect from the assessment, and we show how it maps to the learning outcomes of the course itself. And we have sessions built into the course where we have a drop-in session, Q&A session for students who can say, right, I'm trying to tackle this particular piece of assessment. How do I do it? How do I start? So each of our summative assessments, so they're the ones that contribute to the overall mark, they do have a formative assessment attached to them. So that's students' opportunity to practice what they need to do in order to achieve high marks in the summative assessments. And we try and make sure that we build in the formative so that they're testing particular skills that are going to be needed in the creation of the summative assessment as well. And we also, like I said, we have drop-in sessions so that students can specifically focus on problems they're having with assessments. And ICE, as a wider provision, has online learning resources. There's a tremendous amount of information available on the virtual learning environment, directing students to tasks such as, how do I actually reference properly? Or, I'm used to referencing in a completely different style because my background is quite different. And in my particular field, we don't use that style. So how do I adapt? How do I learn? What's a good way of me learning? What's some good information sources? And we do also have support available for students for academic writing skills as well. So this is all introduced at the beginning of our courses on the virtual learning environment and available to students throughout, as well as support from our wellbeing teams as well. So we do encourage students to remember it's there, because often there's such a flurry of information at the beginning of the course that sometimes students forget that we've posted it there. So partway through the course, we try and send reminders out. So just by the way, in case you'd forgotten that there's this information here and this is how you find it again. So that's something that we do with the undergraduate courses. But Kenny, what happens with the postgraduate courses in terms of that support mechanisms for achieving assessments?
Because of the intensive mode of delivery, it's typically not the same time for cycles of reflection. So the formative points built in, we have things like practical classes, which are closely supervised. Students work through tasks, get feedback on the tasks, I guess, and obviously the signposting. The university has a wealth of resources available for referencing and writing, and so on and so forth. I guess the majority of the support is oriented around the longer pieces of assessment, the literature review, the dissertation, which the dissertations were 60 credits, got a serious piece of work. Students will submit a proposal following negotiation with me, a discussion about are they asking the right kind of question, the right kind of way that's going to generate something sufficiently rich that meets our learning outcomes. And then there are formative feedback points as they're preparing the piece of writing. So yeah, most of the focus is put on the dissertation, which is more longitudinal.
And Jeremy, how does that compare in medical education?
So each, as I've mentioned earlier, each of our students has their own individual tutor, and what we get them to do, and we offer them before each of the summative assignments, there's the one at the end of module 1 and the end of module 3, the opportunity to upload a draft assignment and ask for formative feedback and make sure they're online to meet the requests. And we're very explicit about, we should show them the marking rubrics, and we ask them now to use what's called dialogic feedback, where they actually ask what they want feedback on, and we will give them feedback on that. We also have a session, just thinking about your idea about referencing and citing and all of those sort of things. We have a session from our clinical school librarian lasting a half a day, where she talks to them specifically about how to do literature searching using what's available, and so how to use the different platforms there are to do that, and also how to do the referencing that we use, which is Harvard for the postgraduate certificate in medical education.
Thank you. So another question that we often get asked is, how long is this going to take me? So how many hours study time am I going to have to put into this? So Kenny, would you like to field that one?
Good, back of a fag packet calculation. Well, you think about, in sector-wide terms, what do credits mean? And obviously, Quality Assurance Agency and others try to sort of standardize what a block of learning means when it comes to student engagement. So all our modules are 15 credits, which normally translates into 150 hours of learning time, all in all. And a large proportion of that is independent learning, which is supported by the VLE and the teaching team. So if we'll have something in the order of 30 hours of intensive in the room, face-to-face, educator-led sessions. And so the remainder of the time, students will spend in carefully directed, self-directed learning, and a chunk of that will be dedicated to the assessment. So I guess that's what you're thinking about. Per module, you want to be able to set aside 150 hours. But absolutely, you want that intensive week where the face-to-face learning is focused.
Thank you. And Sarah, how does it work with the online courses?
So obviously it is very self-directed, and it's up to the students to put in what they need and can obviously fit it around, say, another job. All the synchronized sessions are on a Saturday, so that doesn't impinge on other commitments for people. But we asked a question earlier during certificate to immunology. So a rough estimate is sort of, if you work on a 10-week-ish term or 10 weeks per unit, it'd be about 20 to 25 hours a week, I suspect, that students probably will need to allow themselves. You know, you can bulk it up and perhaps do it in the holidays, but yeah, that to get a grasp, because it's a big topic, and I would say it's the same with the infectious diseases and some of the other undergraduate certificates. You need to be able to dedicate a sort of good chunk of time, and doing it weekly helps to build on your learning, obviously, rather than leaving it all to the last minute.
So we're coming towards the end of our session, actually, and I've got the Q&A box open from Zoom, but there haven't been any questions posted in it. So if anybody's sat there thinking, I want to ask a question, I ought to ask a question, can you please post it up so that we've got the opportunity to answer it before the end of the session? So whilst people think about what they might want to ask of us, any last comments from any of the team, who things you want to say whilst we've got this opportunity and people listening to us? Kenny, any final thoughts?
Well, again, don't be put off by the fact that Cambridge has a reputation, but we have a team here, we've got an educational team that want to support learners and afford people opportunities. So the MST was designed with healthcare professionals in mind, but I mean that covers a lot of individuals. So come and talk to us. There are a number of pathways. We want to facilitate that entry into genomic education, genomic learning, and developing that next generation of practitioners. Come and talk to us. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. Jeremy, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the same really. I mean, I don't think you can, a lot of people do this as well as holding down a full-time job and manage to do both. And it is manageable, and I think we appreciate that a lot of them, they're all going to be healthcare professionals with responsible jobs, and so we try not to overload them. I think if they really want to know what the students think of it, look on the PG Cert website, and there are 2 videos, and the one that I think is particularly useful is the one where it says, "Hear what our students say," and that was done without our knowledge. Done by one of the participants who went round and used his iPhone and interviewed people at the end of the course, and then put together a little video, which was very useful. And I think you'll hear what people say about the course, and I think that's fairly genuine. It's about what people think.
Fantastic, thank you, Jerry. Any final thoughts from you, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't be put off. So the undergraduate certificate, we don't, certainly in immunology, we don't assume any level of technical knowledge, if that makes sense. So our short answer questions, we've got some data handling questions in that module, and that simple things, and so I actually do go through that in the synchronous sessions. I actually take people through how to construct a standard curve in Excel, which isn't a reasonably available software, because I realise, particularly if they're much older learners, they might not have got that up-to-date computer knowledge or have used that sort of software, and might have been more used to doing a standard curve with a piece of graph paper and interpolating the results that way. So it's and the tutors are very willing to help bring people up to speed if they feel that they're behind the rest of the cohort. So it is accessible to all, and we will endeavour to make your experience as learning as directed to you as possible.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I think that about wraps up our session. I just really want to thank the panelists for joining us on this call and answering all of these questions. And please do, if you've got any queries about any of the courses at ICE, please contact us. I think there's some notes been put in the chat, but also look at our web pages and just get in touch. Please, as everyone said, don't be frightened. It is a fantastic institute to be part of and to work with and to learn from, but it is genuinely open to a very wide diversity of people and skill levels. Come and see what we have, and I'm sure we've probably got a course that meets your needs somewhere. Thank you.